Welcome back to Ray's Talk Show. This is your virtual Big Brother, Ray Collazo. Thank you so much for joining us. And we have I just want to get right into it because we have a very special guest here on Ray's Talk Show, which you can find anywhere you can download a podcast at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, or you can just check out all of our content at rayspodcast.com. That's RAYS podcast.com. This has been quite a year between the political upheaval, not only in our elections, but in some of the various hot issues impacting the Latino community, especially on our beloved island of Puerto Rico. The impact of our leadership organizing around the country to address these issues, how social media and the online space has what that's meant to that movement, and what lessons we can learn in this moment of history, and who better to involve in that conversation but the president and CEO of Nos Communications and one of the top Latina social influencers in our space and a great friend to the show, Natascha Otero-Santiago. Natascha, welcome to Ray's Talk Show.
Hello, Ray. How are you? And thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the podcast today, of the radio show. Thank you so much.
Natascha, it's really a pleasure. And now I can check Natascha off a list, which is kind of a fun list I like to keep, because Natascha, until recently, was the best friend I had who I'd never met in person. But we were able to. The social media world is quite something. You develop these relationships with people you don't even know them. But me and Natascha, between Marcos Vilar and too many friends to name here, have a lot of great mutual friends and have gotten to know each other this last year online. But we were able to meet each other briefly at Hispanicize. So now the number one, the person that's on top of that list is another mutual friend of ours, Natascha, Julio Varela, who's a homie of mine online, and I've just never got a chance to meet him in person. It's just one of those things, but that'll happen soon enough. Natascha, again, welcome to the show, and definitely want to let people know a little bit about Natascha. Natascha is one of the most important Latinas that we have doing public relations and campaign work online. She's the president and CEO of Nos Communications, with over 20 years of experience in U.S. Hispanic marketing, providing small businesses and Fortune 500 companies culturally competent public relations and social media campaign services. She's also the founder of Parranda Puerto Rico, an organization that unites Puerto Ricans throughout the diaspora. She's been honored by the Huffington Post, Latism, and Ford Motor Company for her leadership, not only as a blogger and social media influencer, but as an online activist. Natascha, thank you again so much for joining Ray's Talk Show.
Oh, well, thank you, Ray, and thank you for that introduction. I am very happy to be here, and it is true. It's amazing how social media can unify many people with similar interests and similar ideas, and you are friends online, and by the time you meet each other, it's like you have been brothers in arms or sisters in arms, a brotherhood of people meeting through social media. I have to thank the way that it has changed, the way that it has changed how people communicate, how people interact, how people share projects, ideas, everything. It is amazing. And you and I are examples of that.
Absolutely. And it's great because, Natascha, I love to learn about people like Natascha, because I was raised by, as I share with people, Natascha, all the time, is that between my mother and my wife, I've had a Puerto Rican woman boss my whole life, and I've done pretty well for myself. So to meet another strong Puerto Rican woman and as looking at your bio, as my mother would say, ella está en todo. She's very prolific in not only in your career, but in your activism. Natascha, before this journey as one of the most impactful Latinas in social media marketing and in the blogosphere did not begin in 2016. So Natascha Otero-Santiago, where did this journey, the Nos Communications journey, begin for you?
Oh, my goodness. It's been 20 years. So it's a little bit, I have to look back. It's actually been more than 20 years, but they tell you to just say 20 years so you don't look as old as you feel sometimes. I actually... I fell into public relations because of my work in museum world, believe it or not. I graduated with a master's in art history and museum studies. So my first jobs had to do with art and history and art history in museums. So I worked in Boston, and then I came to Miami, opened 2 museums. And when you open a new museum, it is very interesting because you become a jack of all trades. And the jack of all trades is that I became, programs coordinators, community management, public relations. And so that inspired me to continue a public relations career. NOS Communications, I started it in 2007. I actually have been working with the Hispanic community and seeing the importance of the Hispanic community. As a Puerto Rican in South Florida, it was very interesting for me to see how it was growing, the Puerto Rican community in South Florida. And for the last 22 years that I have lived here, I moved here in 94. So I saw that the importance of dealing with the Hispanic market, but specifically with the Puerto Rican market in South Florida. The activism, the part of, the PR that I have done, I work with Hispanic markets like DHL Americas and with Ford, the Hispanic Communications. I love to work with small businesses. And a lot of them have to be with Puerto Rican roots. Jimmy's Kitchen in Wynwood, the Wynwood Brewing Company, which are both owned by Puerto Ricans. So you can see where I lean to when I do PR, public relations, but it's more about bringing the community together. I use public relations and social media to do that, to try to activate the community, to visit clients, but also to meet each other and network. I think the stronger a community can become in an area, the more power they have to make change for their community.
Natascha, I'm sure people listening to this are curious what were some of the keys for you to transition not only from the arts world into public relations and social media marketing, but to start your own business in that field? Because one of the principal reasons I started Ray's Talk Show is that I know thousands of Natashas, very talented people from our community, majority of which are women, who feel stuck. They're sort of overqualified and, somewhere between bored and exasperated by their work. And they're looking for something new and exciting. And also they want to lead their own vision for a business or for a career. So what were some of the keys that you can share with our Ray's Talk Show listeners about that led you to be able to identify a new career path and start your actually own business?
Well, that's a great question to ask, and one that when they invite me as a panelist of women entrepreneurs or Hispanic, Latino women entrepreneurs, it is interesting because women in the Puerto Rican and Latino cultures are very well respected for being the jefas of the household. I mean, if the abuelas, the abuelas, the tatarabuelas, the bisabuelas are very strong women. And in this time and age, it is important to take that empowerment that the Latino culture gives you at home and bring it outside. There's so many able and capable women to have consulting and entrepreneurial work. Now with the education that a lot of Latina women are actually fulfilling their dreams of being educated, college educated, master's educated, graduate school educated, I think it's very important. So for me, it was the decision to step out of an actual place of work and decide, what, I did have a small child at the time. And I said, what will give me the independence to be able to raise my child, but still be there outside in the community like I was before. And that's when I started my consulting work of public relations. That has been, thank God, very successful. And it has to do with hard work. It has to do with hard work, but not losing sight of why is it that you're doing it. I think that people that have vision, that are educate themselves, empower themselves, are very much able that have the tools and also a community around them have the tools to be able to succeed. I did it with public relations. For me, activation events are very important. So I like to take an event, an idea of activation, as in a marketing or public relations campaign, and say, well, we're going to have this either concerts or food events or activations of sports and millennial projects, et cetera. And I bring it to the table to these different industries or these different companies, and then they activate. So it's projects that I do that really drive my passion. And the same way that it has driven my passion in my work with NOS Communications, it has driven me with my community activism with the Puerto Rican community in the United States and in Puerto Rico.
Natascha, I think one of the things that, particularly for Puerto Rican professionals and people that have relocated to Florida where their ears perked up, is I'm sure there's some people listening to this thinking, wow, so Natascha is actually making money working with Puerto Rican business owners. And I ask you that, and I'm saying that, joking. I say that joking as a Puerto Rican because one of the things that that with a lot of our friend network is that Latinos that are not from South Florida in particular or are Cuban American have a hard time oftentimes in that transition establishing their careers and growing their careers in South Florida because they don't feel like they have the network, either because they're more recently arrived or they feel like, they're not part of the traditional Cuban American families that are some of the most prominent business leaders in different fields. That there's some growing pains, and so the fact that you've identified a business niche in South Florida that's been successful for you, which happens to be based in the Puerto Rican community, I find really fascinating, and I'm sure that what have you found has been this key to sort of identify a niche and be able to flourish within that? Not only working with Puerto Ricans, you work with everybody, but being able to identify companies that fit your style.
Well, I call it the Wepa Factor. The Wepa Factor. The Wepa Factor is that thing that anybody actually that has some kind of Puerto Rican DNA has within them. I don't want to say only Puerto Rican born people. I think that if you are from New York or Chicago or Central Florida and have Puerto Rican parents and abuelas, you possibly have the Wepa Factor too. It's part of your culture. And it's what we say, it's about the warmth that, getting to meet other Puerto Ricans, getting to network with other Puerto Ricans. People kind of identify, they say, if what they're trying is to reach that Puerto Rican Hispanic market, that growth of the Puerto Rican Hispanic market, they realize that a person that speaks their language, el lenguaje puertorriqueño, is going to be much better. They're going to be able to better follow that, put that mission out for these small businesses. So with an example, with Jimmy's Kitchen, who started, he's a fast casual chef-driven restaurant. Let's put it that way. He has mofongo, etc. What did we do? We had like mofongo virgins, and we put it on Instagram, pictures of mofongo virgins. Everybody laughed about it, but it's the truth. I mean, there are a whole world out there that hasn't had mofongo. And so what did we do? Anytime that somebody would try a mofongo for the first time, we would take a picture. And so people identified with that. We started concerts of Bomba y Plena at Jimmy's. And so we brought the culture, the Puerto Rican culture. So we had people coming all the way from Tampa, believe it or not, or from Orlando, and all the way down to Homestead, coming to this small plaza in Wynwood, which happens to be, for people that don't know, Wynwood was the original Puerto Rican area of Miami. There actually was a Puerto Rican area of Miami, and it's called Wynwood, which now is like the Soho of Miami. So we actually brought the culture back of Puerto Rico into Wynwood. So I realized that by speaking my Wepa language, my Puerto Rican language, I could identify small businesses and larger businesses that wanted that voice and wanted them to, you know, us to speak to the Puerto Rican community, which in South Florida has grown exponentially. In Puerto Rico, the last 22 years that I have lived here, I have been going from being the token Puerto Rican friend of most of my friends here in Florida, in South Florida, to being one of many Puerto Ricans that have moved. We are more than 300,000 in the South Florida area. And there is a lot of professionals. So, one of the things that we're trying to do, Ray, is now identifying and doing a network of professionals, of people that are moving here, and doing a directory. So, we have the names of lawyers, of CPAs, of bankers, of doctors, of teachers, of everybody that wants to be on that network, with the idea that we can be a welcoming kind of committee to the new Puerto Ricans that are moving here. So when you move here, you get to know, okay, you need a realtor, you need information about, your estate, your banks, your this. Okay, here is a whole package of Puerto Ricans that can help you. Puerto Ricans that lived in the island until 6-7 years ago, and now are living in South Florida. And so people identify with that. So that's what we're trying to do now, to expand that kind of network of professional Puerto Ricans here.
It's so funny you talk about virgin mofongo because first of all, every time when you say mofongo, people just smile because it's so delicious. And I've had that conversation dozens of times in my life where, particularly with our Mexican American friends from the Southwest, where they go to the first time they go to Florida, or the first time they go to their Puerto Rican friend's house in Chicago, or whatever the story was, where they had their first mofongo and the light went on and there was this aha moment. It's just so great for people to experience that kind of happiness and to share that with them. And then the other thing I wanted to share is that I want people to really listen to what Natascha is saying. And there's two other things I got out of that about your comments. One is that, don't underestimate particularly the cultural, how marketable our culture is, and just thinking about some of the best practices that you and your clients are utilizing, whether it's food, the arts, and just our Wepa Factor. Being Puerto Rican is marketable. I mean, we could see our talents are appreciated oftentimes all over the world and least appreciated amongst our own community sometimes. So,
Exactly.
so I think that thinking about how you can market your products and services and the things that we grew up doing. I mean, a friend of mine often tells me, he goes, when I was a little kid, coconut water was something you got out of a coconut. And now, it's packaged and people are making, and now it's a healthy alternative to soda. And there's people making all kind of money on whether it's Zumba, our natural fruit juices. You just go on and on and on. Chipotle. I mean, there's all this money being made on our culture. And I've often thought that it's so great to hear what you're doing with your local businesses in South Florida, because think about how, from a branding perspective, and God bless them, I say this out of love and respect, how much the Cuban food brand has spread all over the world in a way. And the Puerto Rican, even though we have great Puerto Rican restaurants around the country and around the world, that brand does not exist in the same way, even though the cultures are so, and the foods are virtually the same. So marketing our culture and our talents in an authentic way is actually very marketable, and people need to think about it that way. And I think the bottom line is, Natascha, it's regardless of you focusing on being a Puerto Rican or other talents or other parts of our personalities, you just have to be who you are. And I think that social media has provided me an outlet as a Puerto Rican. I was raised in a very Puerto Rican community in Philadelphia to really have an outlet to express myself, not just as a Latino or as a person of color, as a Philadelphian, as a sports fan, but as a Puerto Rican, to discuss things and have conversations with Puerto Ricans from a Puerto Rican perspective, whether they're quote unquote Puerto Rican issues or just Latino issues or other issues in the context of being a Puerto Rican. And we just have to be, regardless of who you are, you have to be comfortable who you are. And it's okay to address issues and speak on things from your various perspectives, right? We all wear so many different
Exactly.
hats. Natascha, speaking about Puerto Ricans and the Wepa Factor, I love that phrase. We definitely want to talk and reflect with one of our top Puerto Rican leaders around the country as it relates to mobilizing the Puerto Rican diaspora around the numerous issues we continue to deal with this year, principally around the economic distress on our beloved island and the aftermath of that. And before we get into the next segment, Natascha, why don't you remind people of your social media handles and anything you'd like to share about your business?
Oh, well, thank you so much. Okay, so in social media, you can find me all over the place as Natascha OS. That's NATASCHAOS as in Sam. So in Instagram, on Twitter, even on Facebook. And my company is noscommunications.com with a hyphen. And I am here, in South Florida, but I deal with clients all over the nation. So thank you so much. And then the network of Parranda that I suppose we're going to talk about is parranda.org. And in Twitter is Parranda Puerto Rico. Parranda PR, I'm sorry, Parranda PR on Twitter and Parranda Puerto Rico on Facebook. And it's actually a social outlet for Puerto Rican issues and community and cultural issues of the Puerto Ricans in diaspora and in the island.
That is great. And by the way, Natascha, let's make sure offline I send you have two of my compadres are one's Puerto Rican, one's Dominican, married to a Puerto Rican woman. Are the kind of both live in South Florida now, so I have no one in Philadelphia to hang out with anymore because all my compadres moved to Florida and the good life.
Oh
But on
my
the flip
God.
side, it's a blessing for you because it's a blessing for me too because we have people to hang out with in South Florida now and we visit them often. But they're the kind of people I definitely want to connect to be part of your network. They're wonderful families, the Santiagos and the Garcia Sejos, and definitely the kind of people I think would enjoy your network. So let's make sure we connect you with our friends down there. So for those that have not been following, and certainly many of you listening to this have been, but this has been a really historic year and sort of a crossroads year for the island of Puerto Rico and the Puerto Rican community, whether they're on the island or throughout the world. And I wanted to bring Natascha on the show today to really sort of reflect sort of post Promesa, and we'll remind people what that was and is, sort of in the midst of this ongoing advocacy to support the island of Puerto Rico during its economic crisis and what that means for Puerto Ricans and Latinos leading up to this historic election in a few months. I thought it was good timing for Natascha to be on this, to have this conversation and get her reflections on what this last year's meant to her and the lessons that we all can take from this, not just as Puerto Ricans, but people that are interested in engaging like-minded people online. So to reflect on it, so to remind people, there is an ongoing economic crisis on the island, which has many tentacles, but the principal issue is that there's a massive amount of debt that the island has accrued. There needs to be an entire series of podcasts dedicated to really explaining how the island got in this position and the U.S. federal government's role and corporate America's role in that. But the bottom line is that it came to a head about a year and a half ago, and it's provided the Puerto Rican community, not only on the island but throughout the world, to mobilize and address this issue as a Puerto Rican diaspora. So, Natascha, there's lots to it, but let's just begin where, over the last year and a half, when this really sort of came to a boiling point, walk us through sort of how you got involved and how you what this year has meant for you in terms of mobilizing the Puerto Rican diaspora online.
Yeah, so I actually have been very involved with the Puerto Rican community in South Florida. And in October of last year, they invited me to be part of a meeting that they were having with political and community leaders in Orlando. And it was the roots of what is now called the National Puerto Rican Agenda Organization. The community saw the impending problems that were happening with Puerto Rico's financial situation, like you said. There had already been a problem with, social problems in Puerto Rico, but now it was the economic part. And they knew Congress was going to get involved. There had been hearings happening regarding what to best do because the government of Puerto Rico did not have the monies to be able to pay their creditors. So there was an organization of diaspora leaders to try to lobby Congress and become the voice and the vote that the Puerto Ricans don't have in the island. Out of the Congress hearings and the Natural Resources Committee, there was the birth of a bill called Promesa. Promesa, for those who don't know, a lot of people say, well, it's not a promise, but are the letters of the Puerto Rico Oversight, Management, and Economic Stability Act. And so for shorten, they call it Promesa. So Promesa was being discussed in the Natural Resources Department Committee of the Congress for, I would say, around 2 months, and they went back and forth. Actually, I have to say that the representative of the Puerto Rican political, the three Puerto Ricans that we have in Congress, who are Jose Serrano and Nidia Velázquez and Luis Gutierrez, they acted to try to lobby and change some of the wording that was about Promesa, that Promesa, was imposing a fiscal oversight board that would go over Puerto Rico's democratically elected government. And there were some things that were changed, but in order for it to pass, which Congress wanted to pass, the Department of Treasury wanted to pass, the Obama administration wanted to pass, it went through. And it went through still with a lot of things that are not good for Puerto Rico. And it depends on who you talk to, what is happening with Promesa. So a lot of people are unhappy about this in Puerto Rico and outside Puerto Rico because out of the people that had to be elected, there was only one thing that said that it was only one person had to have residency in Puerto Rico. And so they don't know who are the people that are being looked into, if they're going to be Puerto Ricans at all, or they're going to represent the hedge funds and the creditors' interests much more than the Puerto Rican economic stability. So we are working, with the National Puerto Rican Agenda that actually finally got organized in Camden, New Jersey in a month ago, it got organized to act as a watchdog to see what's going to happen in Puerto Rico. We know that anything that affects Puerto Rico will affect the migration of Puerto Ricans into the U.S. And it has been doing it. People are saying that the migration of Puerto Ricans in the last 6 years has been even larger than the famous one to New York in the 40s and the 50s. So I think that we are going to see much more of this in the months to come and years to come.
Yeah. So Natascha, I wanted to ask you, this has been, and for those that have not been a part of this, I want to say as someone that's been, not only locally out of Philadelphia, part of the National Puerto Rican Agenda, sort of Philly chapter, but also involved in it on a national level with my day job political hat and working with people like yourself and Dr. Edward Melendez, a great man who's the head of the MPRA. I must say that this has been Puerto Ricans have not gotten enough credit for the unified approach that we've taken to this, and we were having a conversation offline before the interview, but I wanted to share with people that from my perspective, Natascha's right. Puerto Ricans have been organizing themselves throughout the diaspora for a whole long time as it relates to, whether it was charitable efforts for the island, political efforts, maintaining our culture as Puerto Ricans throughout the country and throughout the world. But, politically, it was always very difficult to overcome, frankly, the status issue to mobilize more directly on behalf of the island. And so this issue has been certainly challenging, and there's a lot of humanitarian issues still impacting the island, but has been a mixed blessing in a sense that it really has provided Puerto Ricans in the mainland an opportunity to be very unified in calling and working together across the ideological spectrum on behalf of the island. And quite honestly, we've been pretty sophisticated in the kind of organizing we've done throughout the country, and in the way that we've organized ourselves sort of across communities and working together nationally, and with our Puerto Rican Democratic delegation in Congress, and sort of working sort of within the system and outside the system with our network of grassroots leaders. So kudos to us, I say, and I think we deserve more attention for that work. I would ask you, Natascha, from the perspective of being a social media marketer and public relations specialist, what did you learn this year around as it relates to the power of organizing our community around this issue?
Oh, well, I have learned a lot in the past year, but I started learning the importance of social networking for community involvement when we started the project of Parranda. The project of Parranda started 3 years ago, and that's when the social problems were happening in Puerto Rico. There was high homicide percentage of Puerto Rican. It was horrible. It was more than 1,000 Puerto Ricans being involved in homicides, etc. There were carjackings, home invasions, and so Parranda started out of an answer to that kind of social unrest that was happening in the island. And so we saw the power of being able to be on Facebook and be on Twitter, have a network where people could communicate. Fast forward a year and a half to the beginnings of the National Puerto Rican Agenda, or the unification of the diaspora, and how are they conversing in social, and you can see a growth that is amazing. I mean, Puerto Ricans do communicate through Facebook much more than Twitter, but they communicate through visually through Instagram. They're doing it more on Twitter these days. Even Facebook Live and Periscope are being used for us to know what is happening on a day-to-day basis in the island and with the Puerto Rican communities. The Facebook groups, it is amazing. If you ever have a chance, go and look, for the boricuas word or the Puerto Rican word, and they're groups from all over the world. I mean, they have come, like Boricuas Realengos is one of them that is huge in South Florida area. There is Puerto Ricans in diaspora. There is Puerto Ricans in Alaska, in Hawaii. It's amazing, Ray, how the Puerto Ricans have come together thanks to social media. For activism, it has been a great way of communication. Instead of, the good old ways of sending emails or even sending faxes or trying to get into the media a message, now it's happening the other way around. You put the news in social media or on blogging. We have very strong bloggers in our community, and then it will become news. And I think that is fantastic to keep the conversation going and the interest going on Puerto Rican issues. I don't think that we would have had the response that we had if the pressure of social media would not have been there as strongly as it was when they were constructing Promesa, when they were when the congressmen were voting on these issues. Even the politics of Puerto Rico have changed thanks to social media. And I'm thankful for that, because there is an education being done that needed to be done. I always say Puerto Ricans in the island, and a lot of Puerto Ricans in diaspora, have a veil over their eyes. And it has to do with the status of the island. And so while the political parties in the island were worrying about, you want to be a state or you want to stay a commonwealth, all of these economic and social problems were rising in our country, in our small territory. Not only that, but a lot of Puerto Ricans did not know the reality of our status as concerned to the United States Congress. And in the last 2 months, thanks to the thanks to the Supreme Court having two cases before them that directly impacted, the view of what is the territorial status of Puerto Rico and their decisions on those cases. We were able to realize, well, Puerto Rico is still a non-incorporated territory, which is a very fancy way of saying that Puerto Rico is still a colony of the United States. So in a world where the U.S. government is going to Cuba and exalting the opening of Cuba and the embargo, and our president going and looking at baseball teams, play in Cuba while they have a colony in their own backyard, which is their responsibility. I think it's very interesting that all the Puerto Ricans should know and should understand the reality of this. Doesn't matter how many times we vote on a plebiscite, if Congress at the end of the day is not going to exercise the right of self-determination of the Puerto Ricans, or not going to respect it. So we have to even start asking that question from Congress. Will you respect, if there is a famous plebiscite and even 75% of the Puerto Ricans do vote to either become independent or be a state? I'm trying to be as nonpartisan as possible here. Will Congress even respect that? So those are the questions that we need to be asking, instead of, oh my God, this person is going pro-statehood and pro-Commonwealth and pro-independence. We have bigger problems than that in Puerto Rico, and it's showing by what's happening with Promesa and what's happening with the situation in Puerto Rico.
One of the things from an electoral perspective is, and you were saying this before we started taping, Natascha, that it really opened the eyes for Puerto Ricans to live on the island around, I think on some level, how much Puerto Ricans that live on the mainland care about the island and the future of the island, but also how much more voice they can have, Puerto Ricans living here can have to advocate for the island, because we can vote in federal elections. So as my cousins that live in Dorado tell me, Rafi, when you're voting for president, you're voting for us too. So that realization of this process of really understanding this colonial status and really all that entails has been an eye-opening experience, I think, for Puerto Ricans all over the world, but also the importance of the Puerto Rican vote, particularly coming up in these elections. And, we're working very closely, Natascha, with you in Florida on maximizing the Puerto Rican turnout, and that's gotten national attention. And I would contend that if Puerto Ricans didn't have that hammer over Congress and the political process in states like Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, Promesa wouldn't have even come to the floor of the House of Representatives, because the reality is, they don't get much done in D.C. around any issue, much less a very Latino issue like the future of Puerto Rico. So we already have shown our influence in even getting this to be debated and discussed from a policy perspective. And now we really need to have our voice heard fully in November. So if we have anyone listening that is not registered to vote, particularly if you just moved to Florida, por favor, you got time. You have to flex your rights, and if you have relatives in anywhere in the states, but particularly those key swing states like Florida and Ohio and Pennsylvania and in the Midwest, please let our folks know they need to get engaged. I wanted to ask you, Natascha, I'm interested your take on this. One of the things that's been interesting that Puerto Ricans have always been very proud of is that we've been, we're very supportive of our Latino brothers and sisters. So Congressman Gutierrez being, the leading Latino in Congress as it relates to immigration reform issues, and we're very, in that sense, a very progressive community. We're supportive of immigrant rights. We're supportive of other issues that impact the broader Latino community. And to me, this has been a call to our non-Puerto Rican Latino brothers and sisters, really everybody, but particularly non-Puerto Rican Latinos, that, it's time for us. We need help now, and we need support. So being in Florida, being in a very multicultural, multi-ethnic Latino community, which has a growing Puerto Rican population in South Florida and in Florida. I'm curious what you feel has been the reaction of non-Puerto Rican Latinos to Puerto Ricans mobilizing around this issue.
Yeah, I love the question. I really love the question because the respect that, yes, that our brothers and sisters, Latino brothers and sisters, or respect, or at least I don't want to say compassion, but just, just help, just lending a helping hand. I must say that we need to become more it's twofold. Puerto Ricans need to become more part of the community in order for the communities that are not Puerto Rican to accept the Puerto Ricans, you see. So Marcos Villar talk a lot about that. Is la puertorriqueñidad. We use our flag. We have this national spirit, and sometimes it rubs the wrong way, with our neighbors, because sometimes we can be non-inclusive, believe it or not, in some of the communities. And then we need to open up and we need to let them know we need help. We cannot be so prideful that we are like, we don't need help. We need to educate them and tell them, look, we have big problems. The big thing that happens, and this is Ray, this is one of the things that you're going to see over and over again in immigration communities, is that they believe, come on, guys, you have had U.S. help and you have been part of the United States for 100 years. Most of these immigration groups have had to come as either political, like the Cubans or Venezuelans or Haitians, to put it in the poorest sectors of South Florida. I mean, they come in boats, they come with whatever they have on, and they have made a life in South Florida. And what they're saying is Puerto Ricans have U.S. citizenship, they don't have any problems traveling, why? And you have had all this help from the United States. So we have to see, how at fault Puerto Ricans also are in making those connections when they get to our community. And yes, we are trying, the ones that have been here for a long time are trying to open those, those friendship and those community doors to include everybody and let them know, look, maybe in paper it looks easier than what it's been happening in Puerto Rico for the last 100 years. We are at fault somehow for what's happening, but there are other things that have taken a toll and why we are 72 billion or more in debt in Puerto Rico. So it's an education thing. A lot of people don't even realize that Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. Let me put it that way. It's a lot of education. It's at this small island in the Caribbean and how important it has been for a lot of things in the United States, and how much we have helped to weave a lot of the communities that are Latino communities in the United States. So to answer your question, in South Florida, we still have a lot to grow as a community and to extend those arms of friendship and camaraderie to other groups and the groups
this conversation
to extend that to us also.
I mean, just how esa balancia, how do you, and I think particularly really everybody, but I mean, Puerto Ricans, we're just so passionate about our culture, and we are part of, and I think we've shown many examples how we have been very engaged in the larger Latino community, in the larger community of color in this country, and all Americans. We're some of the most decorated people in the armed services of this country. I mean, we've been as patriotic as anybody else, especially with the sacrifices we've made serving this country. So but like the Puerto Rican political status, it's all the above, and it gets confusing, and you're balancing all these cult identity hats and how to integrate and educate and also hold people accountable to reciprocating that support that we often provide to other communities. So it's an ongoing conversation, and I look forward for Natascha to you being part of that here on Ray's Talk Show. On a lighter note, Natascha, I wanted to get your take on, there was a great milestone for the Puerto Rican community, and particularly Puerto Rican women recently, and that was that Monica Puig, the world-class tennis player, was the Cinderella story, the Olympics, rising from the ranks to win the gold medal. And so not only, winning a very prestigious element of the Olympics, the women's tennis singles title and the gold medal, but being the first Puerto Rican representing the island of Puerto Rico, let me put that disclaimer in there, to win a gold medal. And so this was not only a great moment for our community, but it was a great moment for Puerto Ricans in social media, because we truly did celebrate this together, whether it was Facebook Lives, whether it was, whether it was tweets with pictures and people watching big screen TVs, the people that were representing the island in the stands in Rio. So just wanted to get your reflections, Natascha, about this moment for the Puerto Rican community and sort of the reaction of boricuas in social media.
Oh my goodness. Monica Puig has been her win at the Olympics in Rio. It was a symbol. I see it as an amazing moment of Puerto Rican pride. You can see a whole nation of Puerto Ricans coming together and celebrating this moment. And I always said, if we could put in little bottles that spirit of pride and of communion with your fellow boricuas, no matter where they are, in little bottles, and just keep it, like a good perfume where we can, put it on ourselves anytime that we are talking about other issues about Puerto Rico, it would be fantastic. It would be fantastic. Monica represents in a 22-year-old. She put on her back the whole Puerto Rican legacy of national spirit. And I can explain that. We always, we're talking about the diaspora, the Puerto Ricans in diaspora and the Puerto Ricans in the island. I always like to say that Puerto Rico is at the greater Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is greater than its borders, that it's represented by the 8.5 million Puerto Ricans that live between the United States and Puerto Rico. That is the real Puerto Rico here. And those were the ones that were representative during Monica Puig's win. Social media, Pika Power basically trended on worldwide Twitter. I mean, you don't know how difficult, Ray, is for that to happen. So when you have people pay, Coca-Cola, they're brands that pay, let me not say any names, but they're brands that pay all the time, thousands of dollars to have something sponsored, like a hashtag sponsor. So this was a natural, organic way for the Puerto Ricans to express their pride. So Pika Power was trending on Twitter for 2 days worldwide. Facebook was amazing. They were doing all these videos. There was somebody actually that compiled all these videos from different places, from homes, from restaurants, from gathering places of Puerto Ricans of that second when she won. There was the pride of listening to La Borinqueña for the first time.
That was heavy.
And that was it made a lot of Puerto Ricans, I would say 8.5 million Puerto Ricans, cry at the same time. Whoever was watching.
Oh my God. What a moment.
Exactly. It was an amazing.
It really hits you at that moment. That was it. I mean, in 100 years of Olympic history, this was the first time, and it took and it was a woman. I thought that was very appropriate, Natascha, that a Puerto Rican woman was the one that was able to secure that first gold medal for our community. And let me tell you something. I don't know what was more fun, watching the match. I watched the last 3 matches. I mean, her run was just, from an athletic perspective, was incredible. And it was really cute because when she won the medal and, they get on the stands, she still wasn't taller than the people that were on the lower stands.
Yeah,
So just to see what she had to overcome physically to beat these people that were just much larger than her and powerful, using her guile and her athletic ability, was incredible. But, to be able to, the social media, being in Puerto Rico on social media was amazing, because you literally saw her grandparents watching from a restaurant in Condado. You saw Ricky Martin celebrating in his house. You saw people in the streets in Chicago. You saw people reacting in public settings, caravanas in Ponce. I mean, it was just so much fun. You felt like you were there everywhere. You felt like you were in Rio. You felt like you were in San Juan. You felt like you were in the Bronx. And it was just, it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
You felt like you were at a patronale in your house. I mean, it just was, it just brought us so together. You're so right. What was your, Natascha, you alluded to it earlier, but you did really kind of call us all out on your Facebook post around, let's take that spirit to the rest of to activism and to mobilizing our community. And I'm curious, what was the reaction of people to that call to action that you laid out for us after Monica's win?
Well, believe it or not, I have received many direct messages on Facebook. I have received calls from people. I mean, people that have followed my interest and my passion for Puerto Rico on the Puerto Ricans community, the Puerto Rican community, and they're like, "How can we help?" Yes, what you said, it was right. Let's keep this spirit going, this passion for what's happening in Puerto Rico. It is very interesting. I have had millennials, millennial generation are those, from 20 to 30-year-olds that are part of a strong community in the island of Puerto Rico right now that have become entrepreneurs because of the economic problem. So we have a big diaspora community here in South Florida, and they are calling me and they're saying, we are looking for a mentoring kind of person that would help us. How can we help you take this to our people, to our generation? How can we talk to them and tell them we can make a difference in what's happening? And so I have meetings and calls. And so what we're trying first to do is to welcome Monica in South Florida, where she actually lives and where she trains. So we are doing a kind of a party that is going to happen hopefully the next week. We have a place which is going to be Jimmy's Kitchen, and we have pleneros, and we're talking to the mayor of Miami to write a proclamation for Monica. And I think that will bring the attention. We can talk and we can be in news shows and, radio shows. But I think something like this would bring attention to the Puerto Rican community in South Florida, which is needed. It's like the Puerto Rican parade in New York. Let's do something like that in South Florida. And so can people notice that there is a large community of Puerto Ricans here. And I think it should be taken to Central Florida. I think Monica right now is a representative of everything that is good about Puerto Rico, not only about winning and the national spirit, but the hard work. Like she said, this is, you said Cinderella's story, but the funny thing is, like she says, no, I have worked for what I attain. I worked many years in my tennis skills, etc. This doesn't come from anywhere. And that's what we have to teach people. Puerto Ricans work hard for what they want. They have passion. They're hard workers. Start taking away that notion that Puerto Ricans are lazy, that they don't like to work, that kind of backlash that we get all the time, which is so horrible to see. Let's present to the American public and to everybody that we are these people that take pride in what they do, unite when they need to, and are active. And that is the most important thing, because I think our political leaders, and when I said our political leaders, I don't mean the Puerto Rican political leaders. I actually mean our U.S. political leaders need to take a note of what's happening in Puerto Rico and with the Puerto Ricans. I think it's very important. I think neither of the campaigns is doing as much as a good job as they should on letting Puerto Ricans know that they're going to be taken care of when all is said and done in the elections in November.
Well, that is a whole other conversation, but one we will continue to have here on Ray's Talk Show. But Natascha Otero-Santiago, you've been such a wonderful ray of light, and I think how you laid out how Monica Puig really represents what Puerto Ricans really are about, and you got on my radar screen a few years ago with discovering Parranda, and I remember sharing with my mother and other friends. I said, this is great because Puerto Rican nerds finally have a place to commiserate because, people like me, people don't, it's tough being a Puerto Rican nerd intellectual sometimes because, our celebrities, and I love it. I love all of them and all of our cultural icons, and our athletes and all of them. I root for all of them. I support all of them. And, but the rest of us, there's all of us, we're in everything, the sciences, the arts, the, business and, any genre you have Puerto Rican representation and people that have the values of that we can all be proud of as Latinos and all Americans.
And if I can put, thank you. If I can put my 2 cents there, please do follow the National Puerto Rican Agenda.
Absolutely.
Yeah, become part of. We have a Nation Builder website. Please become part of it. Also, we are in social media. We are in Facebook, and we have a Twitter handle that is P-Rican Agenda. And become part of the change. We're trying to unify a lot of Puerto Ricans. 8.5 million Puerto Ricans is a lot of Puerto Ricans, but I know that we can do that.
That's right.
And I think that it is important. There are chapters that were created. So there's a chapter in Chicago, there's a chapter in New York, Philadelphia, there is one in Connecticut, Washington, D.C., Central Florida, South Florida, and we are only growing. And I think that's very important, that kind of network and compadre feeling that we need to have. I mean, we need to transfer that passion that Puerto Ricans have in the island for the politics in the island. We need to do it here in the United States. If I can just do a last percentage of what's happening, 85% of Puerto Ricans go out to vote in the island. That's how passionate they are about the politics over there. Something happens on that guagua area that I like to call it when they come to the United States, where it plunges to 52%, and that's the best number we have ever gotten. We need to raise that. We need to have our votes and voices heard. So with that said, please go register to vote and vote, not only in the primaries. Here in Florida is August 30th, which is very necessary, but definitely on the elections in November.
And I will put in the show notes for this episode of Race Talk Show, and we really appreciate Natascha Otero-Santiago from the NOS Communications and many of her monikers, the NPR National Puerto Rican Agenda, the Parranda Network, that she's a leader of as well. I will put a link to, you can register online nowadays. I mean, it is very easy, easier than ever before to get involved in the process. And once you're registered, we need you to come out early and often, and I will, even if it's not out by next Tuesday, I'll make sure Latinos, especially Puerto Ricans in Central Florida, need to vote in this primary, which is wrapping up on Tuesday in Florida. We have an opportunity to elect a Puerto Rican Democrat to U.S. Congress from Florida. So Darren Soto, much respect to our friend there. So let's we have time. We need to mobilize ahora. So to get ready for that, especially for, that's just before we even get to the general. Natascha Otero-Santiago, you've been such a wonderful ray of light. This has been a great conversation. You'll definitely be back. And I think I draft you, and it was so great to hear you, Julio, and Sandra and Lily on In the Thick.
Yep.
I want to give a shout out to our friends at Maria Hinojosa's Futuro Media Group Network, and with a great political podcast, and you guys really got into it, Entre los Boricuas, which was great, and you guys are all great friends. And but I really think you, Sandra, I would also draft Patricia Guadalupe. There's a few other Puerto Rican personalities that I think really need to have a consistent podcast. So I would definitely love to help you guys put that together, because I think we could talk about Puerto Rican stuff every day, every week. There's so much going on.
There is.
But I really want to thank you, Natascha. And please, I give you the final word. Please remind people they can find you on social media and anything else you'd like to share with our audience.
Oh, well, thank you, Ray. This has been definitely a ray of light, talking about Puerto Rico today and about Puerto Rican issues. You can find me and talk to me and converse with me on Twitter at Natascha OS. That's NATAS as in Sam, C as in Charlie, HAOS as in Sam. So don't forget that S and that C. And I'm also on Facebook. My Facebook, my life is an open book. And I'm in Instagram also. And NOS Communications, you can find all my my information at our about.me/Natascha OS. So it has been a pleasure being here, and I hope it's the first of many conversations and encounters about Puerto Rico in your podcast.
Seguro que sí. Muchas gracias y pa'lante, Natascha.
Gracias, mi corazón.